Welcome to the first video on logic and reference formulas. Let's get started learning the basics on the lookup, VLookup, and HLookup formulas. Let's get started with a simple basic example that everybody can understand. So I put together this test results table for the student and then the percentage that they received on the test, but I don't have the letter grade that corresponds to this percentage. So I put in the grading scale of saying what percentage equates to which grade, and now I need to go ahead and write the formula that can look up this percentage in this grading scale and pull back the correct grade into this column. You can see that we can easily do this manually by saying, hey, he got a 59. Well, that's a letter grade E. So I'm just going to put E here, and 64, that's between here and here, so this person got a D. Well, this is super manual, so that's why we don't want to do this. We want to write a formula and then carry it all the way down through all of the students. The first formula we want to learn is the lookup formula and understand what this does. And you can see that there's two different ways of writing it with different types of arguments it's asking for. We're going to use the second one first, but they both use this lookup value, and we're looking up this 59% because we want to know what is this 59% equal to as a letter grade in the grading scale. So I'm going to put a comma and go to the array part. So the array is simply just this table. Control-Shift over and down and then close up the parentheses. And Excel quickly finds that it's letter grade E. So the first thing you're probably saying is, how did Excel know that this column, this percent column, was the column I wanted it to look up my percentage against? And then how did it also know that I wanted it to pull back the letter grade in this last column? I mean, why didn't it pull the middle column? And it's actually implied in this formula. So the lookup formula always takes the first column on the left and then looks up the furthest column on the right whenever that match is made. The next thing you're probably thinking is 59%. I don't see 59% in the percent column. I do see a 0 and a 60, but how did it know that to stop on the 0% and grab letter grade E? And that's because it's actually an approximate match. It's not looking exactly for 59%. It's looking for, hey, if I go over 59%, then I need to back up and grab this row. Now for the next one, let's lock up this formula so that the range stays the same. Hit enter. And let's drag this formula all the way down. Now the next thing is, does this still work? 64% for letter grade D. So Excel is going down, down, and it hits 67% and says that's too much, bumps back up one, and then comes over. So it's imperative actually that this is sorted from lowest to greatest. So if I flip this and say, hey, rearrange this table so it's largest to smallest, all of my values will screw up because Excel starts at 59% and starts here and says, whoa, that's way too big, and it doesn't know what to do. It says there's nothing available for me to look up here. So let's switch that back. Now if you remember, I said that this lookup formula can be written in two ways. So let's take a look at how we can do it in this lookup vector and result vector format. And the lookup vector is saying, what specific column do you want me to look up in? And so specifically we want to look up this percent in the percentage column. And then we want to look up the result in this result vector column. And I'm going to lock that up with F4 and hit enter. And it looks like it came back perfect. And let's just drop it down and copy across everything. Again, it's still the same grade. Now, just for the fun of it, let's pull this column, the result vector, and pull it over here on student and see what happens. And let's just double click it down and see where things are coming. So it's looking first at, let's see, 76%. It says Mike. Why did it come back Mike? Well, it's 76%. If I'm here, I'm greater than 0, greater than this number all the way here. It hits 73, 77, says 77, that's a little bit more than 76. Back up one, then come to the left, find Mike, and that's why Mike is here. That doesn't make any sense why we would use it this way, but I'm just showing you that no matter if it's on the left side or the right side of the lookup column, Excel will still return this value in the result vector. So let's go ahead and start learning the VLookup formula. And the VLookup formula has similar arguments. It has a lookup value, which is obviously going to be our 59%. It has a table array, so instead of calling it an array or a result vector or a lookup vector, it has this table array. And I'll lock that up with F4. And then the next thing is a column index based on this table. So Excel with the VLookup formula, just like the lookup formula when we were using a big array, it starts and looks at the leftmost column for the lookup value. And then the thing that's neat about the VLookup is it's saying, all right, which column do you want me to return? The first column, second column, or the third column? So you manually type this in and say the third column. And then the last one is the range lookup. And it's in brackets, so by default it's approximate match, or you can say false for exact match. And this could also be a 1 or a 0 in place of true or false. I'm going to type true just to explicitly state that I want it to be true and as an approximate match. Several things I want you to notice from the difference between the VLookup and lookup formulas is that in the VLookup it can be an approximate or an exact match. So if I change this to 0 or a false answer, meaning it's an exact match, Excel won't find it because nowhere in this percent column is 59 exactly shown here. But if I change the 0 to 59%, then it will find letter grade E. Let me switch this back. And the next thing is that, and let me change this to number 1. And the next thing is that the column index, I can only work with these columns to the right of the percent column. So I can say I want to return this value, or the value in field number 2, or the value in column number 3. I can never look to the left like we did with the lookup formula on the student column. So these are a couple subtle differences between the VLookup and lookup formulas. Now let's quickly take what we just learned and apply it to this income statement and run two different types of lookups, another VLookup and a new HLookup. And if you haven't guessed it yet, a VLookup stands for vertical lookup and HLookup stands for horizontal lookup. And it all depends on the aspect of how the table that you're looking up against is written and what value you're looking up. So if I'm looking up something vertically, that would mean I'm looking up in one column, each row checking, is this my value I want to look up? And then going over columns to find out the specific value I'm looking for. While the HLookup takes the columns and looks across them horizontally and finds maybe the month I'm looking for, and then comes down and says I want to look at maybe not net sales but cost of goods sold, so the first, second, third row in the data. Now let's go ahead and take a peek at how I'm able to return the exact same value whether I'm using a V or an HLookup on this table. You can see this is 3205 and that's what these answers are here. So if I pop into it with F2, first you'll see that I'm looking up net sales, and also at the end of the statement it says false, meaning it's an exact match. So within double quotes, net sales, it perfectly says that right here, so it matches it, and then I'm telling Excel to go over 5 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's why it's finding 3205 here. So I'm going to hit enter. Let's take a peek at HLookup. HLookup, instead of looking vertically, again this is looking horizontally. And it's looking for April. Again, it's an exact match with false. So April is up here in the top row. And just like in a VLookup, the leftmost column is where it's looking up at. Well, with an HLookup, the topmost row is where the lookup row is. And it's looking up and finding April here. And we're telling it to go down 2 rows. So 1, 2, and that's why it's finding 3205 as well.